African activists are honored for their work empowering children on the continent. Focusing on keeping children safe on World Pneumonia Day. And a look at some of the most sought-after toys of the 2015 Christmas season. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The European migrant crisis continues to be a major headache for the European Union. Britain's Home Secretary says the crisis must be tackled by making it possible to return migrants to Africa from Europe. Speaking in Malta at a migrant crisis summit featuring more than 60 leaders from Africa and the EU, Theresa May told reporters part of that equation calls for dealing with the criminal element that help the migrants make their journeys.
We need to break the link between people making the journey across to Europe and reaching Europe and being able to settle there. In order to do that, of course, we need to be able to return people to countries in Africa. That will be part of the discussions today. But also we need to smash the gangs that are actually the criminal gangs that are making money out of human misery.
Well, May says the EU summit has featured constructive discussions between the African and European leaders. She also says that they agree the keys to the African migrant issue are to stop those taking advantage of desperate Africans and to work to ensure that people don't feel the need to make the perilous journey to Europe in the first place. EU leaders on Thursday signed an emergency $1.9 billion trust fund agreement to support the effort. May says Britain alone pledged more than $300 million. Hundreds of thousands of migrants have fled to Europe this year, and more than 3,400 people have died making dangerous sea crossings to Europe this year. At least 14 people drowned Wednesday after a boat sank on a trip from northern Turkey to Greece. Now, for more insight on the migrant crisis, Joel Millman, spokesman for the International Organization of Migration, joins us live via phone from Geneva, Switzerland. Good evening, Joel. Welcome to Africa 54.
It's great to be with you.
Yes, now this Malta agreement, tell us about the most important element of those talks.
I'm sorry, what's the most important element of the talks in Malta?
Yes. Because there's a financial part of it, and also there are several elements there. Which one is that is really most critical when it comes to tackling this issue?
Well, the most critical for our point of view is a world effort to bring peace to the conflicted zones. You know, we know that's the Horn of Africa mostly and Syria that is dominating this migrant traffic across the Mediterranean. Almost everything else are smaller national groups that are following in behind. They're not necessarily fleeing the kind of violence that needs urgent intervention. Nigeria to some degree, but that's really the matter that we think is before the world right now is to bring a political settlement to some of these conflicted zones and halt the incentive, now, to get out of the way of the chaos.
Yes. Now, given that, there are so many dimensions to this, but it's the first time, really, that the African leaders have met with the European leaders about this issue. Do you think this is going to make a big difference henceforth?
It should. I mean, African leaders like Gaddafi, if people don't really remember him as a leader, but he was African and he was dealing with this situation with the European counterparts, have talked to Europe about this for decades. I mean, this is kind of thing that governments, even ones that are hostile to each other, have always found a way to discuss. The U.S. itself, for 50 years was engaged in conversations with Cuba on migration matters. There was a great deal of cooperation. So there is precedent. I mean, I think that the Europeans and the Africans both want to be partners with each other and discuss these things with a sense of reality, not a sense of serious. So, fortunately, we welcome these kinds of summits, but we think that this is pretty normal.
Now, in terms of restrictions within the European Union, what do you make of countries taking measures to kind of make it difficult for one person to cross from one country to another?
The thorniest problem right now. I mean, Germany was very generous in its attitude and its welcoming. And I'm not entirely sure that the other countries around, to the east of that thought that Germany had thought it through carefully enough to understand what would happen. I mean, it's no different in the U.S. if Mexico had said, we invite everybody to come in from Latin America. You know, obviously they'd have to cross the U.S., and that would be something that maybe could have been coordinated a little more fully. But even then, you know, the governments have been pretty flexible, so we're actually optimistic.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for your insights. Joe Millman is a spokesman for the International Organization of Migration. Now, the UN Security Council is expected to unanimously adopt a resolution Thursday calling for an end to violence in Burundi and threatening sanctions against anyone who stands in the way of the search for a peaceful solution. The move comes as diplomats in New York say the UN could rush peacekeepers into Burundi if calm does not return to the East African nation soon. Burundian officials are downplaying the unrest. Violence erupted in Burundi in April when President Pierre Nkurunziza announced that he was running for a third term, a move the opposition called unconstitutional. Mr. Nkurunziza was re-elected in July. In a vote, the opposition boycotted. Election-related violence has killed at least 240 people and sent tens of thousands fleeing across the border. The United States, European Union and Burundi's African neighbors fear the violence could result in another civil war between Tutsis and Hutus. Now, for more details and clarity on the Burundi crisis, VOA's Margaret Bashir joins us live from New York, the United Nations. Margaret, let's first start with the fact that there is a thought that the peacekeepers could be sent to Burundi. Is this something that we can look forward to?
Well, I don't think UN peacekeepers will go to Burundi unless the situation really escalates. But in that case, even, they wouldn't probably be sent because peacekeepers need a peace to keep. They're not a rapid reaction force. So I think what is much more likely is that the African Union would send an East African force into Burundi if the situation continues to unravel. And the UN has said they're working with the AU to do contingency planning for such a potential deployment. But, you know, it's very hard to get peacekeepers quickly anywhere in any situation. It takes usually at least 2, maybe 3 months, because you have to get the troops, equip the troops, send the troops. It's not something that can be done quickly.
How about the other measures that are being discussed under that resolution?
Well, I think the point of this resolution is to intensify pressure on the stakeholders in Burundi, on the government and on the opposition, that they need to stop the inflammatory rhetoric, especially, and that they need to come to the table and discuss things in a civilized way, negotiations, and stop solving the problem in the street with the violence. So the Council is threatening sanctions, as they often do, and we have seen, for instance, in South Sudan, it can take the Council a very long time from threatening sanctions to actually implementing sanctions. But in this case, the African Union has gone ahead and said that they will impose sanctions, and oftentimes that can influence the Security Council to act. If they feel that the regional body has already said sanctions would be useful, then they may be more quick to impose them.
But also there are talks that there could be another round of talks in Kampala. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this morning, the UN, the African Union, and the European Union issued a statement saying they were calling for urgent talks between the opposition and the government in either Kampala or in Addis because they're extremely concerned about the escalating violence. So they said as soon as possible an urgent meeting, so maybe it could come in days. It just depends, I think, on how fast they can get the relevant parties to agree to come to talks. So maybe a resolution from the Security Council today that sends a unanimous, united message that they're very concerned and that they're willing to punish people who spoil the process. Perhaps that would have an impact in getting at least the parties to come to the table.
We'll be watching developments there. Margaret, thank you very much. VOA's UN correspondent Margaret Bashir reporting live from New York. Now, millions of Africans are facing hunger because of droughts and erratic rains linked to record global temperatures and an expected version of the evolving El Niño drought. Minimal rains are forecast for South Africa's maize belt because of El Nino. The phenomenon is expected to bring more drought to an already parched southern African region and potential flooding to East Africa. In Somalia, El Nino has triggered drought in the northwestern region. The UN's World Food says it's at least 1.5 million people are estimated to be facing food insecurity in Zimbabwe following a poor harvest in April. Meanwhile, UNICEF says an estimated 11 million children are at risk of hunger, disease and lack of water in eastern and southern Africa. Now, the World of Children, a U.S.-based child advocacy group, has given its first ever education award to Miriam Mason Sisse of Sierra Leone for her dedication to improve education in her country, and to Winfred Salby of Ghana for empowerment of Ghanaian youth. VOA's Bernard Schassman sat down with the two winners for an interview in New York.
Tell me about your award, what you did to get this special World of Children Award for Education.
So I run an organization called Educate. I'd like to think in a sense that it's not just me, it is, I represent a whole team, and what we do is run education programs in Sierra Leone. So we run a network of schools, and we have a significant now outreach program of teacher training to other schools in our area.
You won this award because of these special programs you've set up for young people.
Yeah.
Tell me about them.
Okay, thank you. My initiative is called the EPF Educational Initiative Empowerment. I'm based in Ghana. What I do is that in Ghana there are young girls that are not motivated to go to school because they cannot afford sanitary pads. So they absent themselves from going to school. Secondly, there are most young girls that are also involved in teenage pregnancy because during their menstrual cycles, they do not get money to purchase these sanitary pads. So some of them involve themselves in premarital sex, and at the end of the day, they involve themselves in teenage pregnancy because they think involving themselves in those premarital sex, they are going to earn money at the end of the day to purchase the sanitary pads for themselves. And school children also in Ghana, some are walking about 7 miles to and from school every single day. Some of these children are barefooted, and whilst they walk barefooted, some are also affected by these soil-transmitted diseases. So actually, when I really sat down about this problem that is really going on in my country, what I thought was education is the key way to success. These youth are the hope of the nation. These are the people that we are expecting them to pick up the leadership mantle in the next years to come. But these are the same people that are facing these challenges in deprived communities. Then where lies the hope of the nation? So that was why I decided to put up the EPF Educational Initiative Empowerment. So what I do is I address these menstrual problem that young girls are facing. We donate to these young girls sanitary pads that will help them go to school. And we also give those school children that walk barefooted to school with educational materials. We provide them with shoes, school bags that will make school going very easy for them. Some of these girls, so we give them educational scholarship to school so that they can get access to education.
And you're a young woman.
Yeah, I'm 20 years of age.
You're 20 years of age.
Some of these young girls, when they see me as an inspiration because they were not expecting that. When I said I was 15 years of age, so they were actually not expecting a young girl to be able to pick up such a great initiative. So anytime they see me that I'm being able to, provide them their needs, they are always happy. And whenever they see me, some of them, I'm a role model to them. They're like, wow, because they know that I'm a hope for them. They know that I give them voice because I'm a voice to these voiceless young girls in Ghana.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, maternal death rates drop in half all over the world. Stay with us.
This is Green Beat for a healthier planet.
They keep hot things hot and cold things cold, but styrofoam ends up in the trash by the billions, and it's not always recycled, at least not by humans. It seems worms, though, mealworms are crazy about the stuff. Wei-Min Wu at Stanford University spoke via Skype. He co-authored a study on the findings that could help solve the global plastic pollution problem.
About 47% the styrofoam was digested and converted into CO2.
In the lab, 100 mealworms consumed about 39 milligrams of styrofoam a day.
After they eat styrofoam, usually mealworm discharges frequently within 24 hours.
The worm excretion is biodegradable, but it would take a lot of worms to digest even just 1 cup. Wu says the idea is to identify the bacteria in the mealworm's gut, which would help researchers develop enzymes to break down polymers. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Well, it's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with a look at maternal mortality rates. Lino.
Researchers tracking global rates of maternal mortality have found that the risks of women dying from pregnancy-related causes has been cut by nearly 50% over the past 25 years. But the new report, jointly released by the World Bank, the World Health Organization, and other UN agencies, also suggests very mixed and uneven results. It shows the Millennium Development Goal of reducing maternal death by 75% by the end of this year has only been achieved by 9 countries. Only 2 African countries, Cape Verde and Rwanda, are among them. Lale Say, the WHO's reproductive health coordinator, says maternal death worldwide, which stood at 532,000 in 1990, dropped to an estimated 303,000 in 2015. World Pneumonia Day is annually held on November 12th to raise awareness of the illness, promote prevention and treatment, and generate action to fight the illness. Pneumonia is caused by a number of infectious agents, including viruses, bacteria, and fungi, including Streptococcus pneumoniae, the most common cause of bacterial pneumonia in children. According to the World Health Organization, pneumonia is the single largest infectious cause of death in children worldwide. An estimated 922,000 children died of pneumonia in 2015. The disease accounts for 15% of all deaths of children under 5 years old, and it is most prevalent in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. The fight against pneumonia-related death in children relies on prevention, protection, and when infections do occur, on better treatment. Joining us live via Skype from Raleigh, North Carolina, to tell us more about the need for vaccine to prevent pneumonia is Elena Ewen, writer and champion for the UN Foundation Shot at Life campaign. Ms. Ewen, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, when we look at these numbers, it's really disconcerting to see how many children die, especially when we know that the disease can be preventable and treatable.
Absolutely. In fact, worldwide, about every 30 seconds, a child dies from vaccine-preventable disease. And it's really astounding to consider that more children die from pneumonia than malaria, measles, and AIDS combined.
This is really an issue. Now, tell us about the issue in the Sub-Saharan Africa, especially given that you just returned from Uganda. What can you tell us about your experience on the ground?
Yes, I was in Uganda and in India recently, and I can tell you the lengths that mothers go through to carry their children to get vaccines that we in the U.S. take for granted. And worldwide, about half the children in the developing countries don't have access to these pneumonia vaccines because they're not necessarily part of their government protocol and what's offered in their suite of vaccines. So I can tell you that there are leaders and mothers and doctors on the ground in these countries who are desperately trying to get these life-saving vaccines to their children.
So when we talk about access to vaccines, can you elaborate a little more on some of the roadblocks?
Absolutely. There are definitely issues in infrastructure just dealing with some of these governments. And then there are issues of having the standard healthcare protocol to ensure that there are trained people on the ground in country to deliver the vaccines. There are obstacles for access for parents to get their children to these clinics. It isn't like in the U.S. where we can just hop in our car and drive a few miles down the road to get our children their flu shots. Parents go through great lengths and walk sometimes 5 to 10 kilometers carrying their children just to access these vaccines.
So what are some of the feedback that you received from mothers in Uganda and India in terms of why it is so difficult for them to see their children being confronted with this disease?
Well, you know, it's funny. I say the sisterhood of motherhood is universal, and regardless where we live, we all love our children with the same depth. And to see the heartache in these mothers who worry about their children if they're even going to live to age 5 really tears at your hearts. And I think that as a mother myself, I see so much of myself in these moms, and I see my own sons in the faces of their children. And I think that once you start to look at these people as fellow mothers and fellow human beings and not just statistics, it makes the statistics even more grave, and it makes me realize these are preventable diseases that we can help have access to. We can help these families have access to. That the U.S. can continue to sustain our foreign funding to maintain the support of the global vaccine program. And this being World Pneumonia Day is a great time for us to contact our representatives to ask for that continued support.
And tell us about the Shot at Life campaign, which you are involved in.
Shot at Life is a campaign through the United Nations Foundation, and our goal is to provide life-saving vaccinations to children in the developing world. And they're for illnesses like pneumonia that are things that we take for granted in the U.S. because we have different access to health care. We're not faced with malnutrition, and we're not faced with some of the other obstacles that families in the developing world are facing. So our goal is to do what we can to work with governments and medical professionals and regular people like myself to help advocate to provide global vaccines.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
And that was Elena Ewen. She is a champion for the UN Foundation Shot at Life campaign. That's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, Leno, thanks a lot. And I'll be sure to watch Leno Madu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, how the toy industry hopes to woo children away from video games with cutting-edge technology.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Sudan, UNICEF starts class registration for students who have been out of school for 2 years since the start of the civil war. In Cameroon, recent UN figures show that the country is hosting 60,000 Nigerian refugees who've been fleeing Boko Haram. In Kenya, largest donors to the country hold a press conference where they criticize the nation's rampant corruption. In Angola, citizens mark 40 years of independence, while President José Eduardo dos Santos vows to bring progress to the country. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. E-commerce giant Alibaba breaks its Singles Day record as sales surge. The shopping day, similar to Cyber Monday and Black Friday in the United States, has ballooned since it was launched by Alibaba in 2009. For the thousands of vendors featured in Alibaba's Singles Day shopping sites, the promotion can be a mixed blessing. Many hope to boost sales and gain customers, but some retailers have said that hefty discounting can undercut the benefits of increased transactions. Next up, the toy industry is hoping to woo children away from their tablets, phones and video games in the lead up to Christmas this year. High-tech toys and those based on Hollywood blockbusters appear to be industry leaders going into the holiday season. Industry insiders predict the U.S. toy industry is poised to have its strongest year in more than a decade in 2015. Improved technology has inspired toy companies to refocus on the elusive 8 to 12-year-old age group. toy makers lost interest in children of this age bracket for several years because they felt they couldn't compete with the kids' mobile devices. And finally, to the United Kingdom, where UK's Toy Retailers Association released its annual Dream Toys list in London. And not surprisingly, Star Wars-related items top the list. Blade Builder Jedi Master Lightsaber by Hasbro, Kylo Ren's Command Shuttle, and the Millennium Falcon, both by LEGO, made spots 1, 2, and 3, thanks to the launch of new products since the beginning of the year. Frozen toy merchandise has more than doubled in sales year-to-date compared to last year. A sing-along Elsa from the Disney film Frozen and an interactive Thunderbirds playset are among items likely to top wish lists. As for Star Wars, sales have tripled since early September. And that's what's trending today, Vincent.
Well, a Kenyan gaming and entertainment company has developed the country's first 3D video game called Nairobi X. As Lenny Ruvaga reports, one of the game's attractions is that it features scenes of the Kenyan capital.
This is Black Division Games. Today, Andrew Kagia, the lead developer, makes adjustments to Nairobi X. The game was released in June, but Kagia is enhancing the console based on feedback from gamers. Players assume the role of an elite tactical ranger who seeks to defend Kenya from an alien attack. Nairobi X has three-dimensional graphics, a first for a Kenyan game. Players have a 360-degree range of motion.
Trying to get accurate depictions of the city. There were no available blueprints, so we had to take photos, and at the time photos were prohibited due to security scares in the city. At one point we got in trouble with police, we were being chased by police officers.
The 27-year-old developer says it took a year and about $10,000 to create Nairobi X.
When it came to development, there were a few technical issues. Being the first game of its kind in this region, there was a lot of learning that we had to go through to get to this point.
Black Division Games says Nairobi X has generated $12,000 in revenue so far. Players pay $1 per month to access the game on their mobile phones or computers.
First of all, Nairobi X is very addictive. Also, when I was walking around town to be able to see what you saw in the game, it's such a good experience. I didn't expect this to find it locally.
The company also released a child-friendly 2D arcade game, Cuckoo Summer, this month. Both games are available in 12 African countries across major mobile operators. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our show. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Have you had to take bad-tasting medicine? The bad taste makes it hard to swallow. But does this expression really have to do with medicine?
Catherine trained the new guy, Eric, to be her assistant.
That's right. She taught him everything he needs to know about her department.
And when it came time for promotion, Eric got the job instead of Catherine. Man, that is a bitter pill to swallow.
The bitter pill in this idiom is an unpleasant fact that is difficult to accept, or, as the saying goes, swallow. In this example, Catherine is the one who must swallow a bitter pill. She has to accept that she did not get a promotion at work. And that's English in a Minute.